Greetings and welcome. My name is Ryan O'Rourke and I truly hope you find delight in today's demonstration. Now if you have any questions or inquiries regarding today's tutorial, I implore you to send me a message either on Facebook or leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Now all of that being said, let's begin. We are going to begin at the top, middle, and center of our rose. And we're going to do so by creating a myriad of miniature half-moon shapes. Now these half-moon shapes, they're going to be slightly wobbly because we want to ensure that they're all a little bit different and have their own unique aesthetic to them. I'm generally connecting them to the middle of another half-moon shaped and then dragging them down. As we expand, we're getting larger. And then from there, I'm going back and I'm adding little lip areas to the bottom portion of all of these areas. And not necessarily all of them, but a good portion. This lip is essentially the flower folding over in one direction or another. This is an easy way to add a lot of organic and interesting detail. And it will ensure that each petal looks fairly different from the next, which is really imperative when drawing these petals. Now from here, you'll notice that I'm really expanding as we move outwards. The whole idea is that in the center, you have a myriad of miniature little petals. However, when you move outwards, they get much larger and you only have a couple of them to work with. So at the bottom, you'll notice that you can only visibly see 3 petals, where at the top, there are so many more. They're folded and intertwined, they're condensed. In the bottom, they have blossomed, they have bloomed, and they are much larger. So that's important to keep in mind. The ones on the bottom are also fairly triangular shaped, and as are petals. The top ones in reality are actually triangles as well. However, they're being folded and condensed, so you see a large portion of them is missing and you can only really see the top portion being moved and spun in a circular motion. However, it is being moved and tapered in. So that's an imperative to recognize when you are doing them, because as they move into the larger portion of the flower, they should be getting smaller and tapering as well. Now from there, I am considering my light source, and that is coming from the far left-hand corner. So everything on the far left-hand area of the flower should be brighter, correct? And everything farther away, it's going to get slightly darker, and that's what I've begun to do with an 8B pencil. Now generally, I'd begin my shading with a H pencil or something much brighter, and then I'd slowly darken it. However, for the sake of this tutorial, to make it easy, to make it simple, we're only going to be using an 8B pencil and a mechanical pencil just for a little bit of detail. But what you really want to do, you want to build up your shades, your darks and your lights, your contrasts. And a reason that you don't normally just go in with such a dark pencil like the 8B is because if you look at it, you'll notice that it's fairly grainy. The lower number in the B's, the brighter it gets, and the softer it gets as well. So you can work with a lot more detail. So you normally just want to slowly edge that number up. But from here, you'll notice that I'm going in, I'm reworking a lot of the detail, and I'm primarily adding a heavy contrast to the darker sides and edges of this flower. I'm then taking a rolled up piece of tissue paper and I'm blending it out, softening it, because again, it can be fairly grainy, and we want to avoid that. What this means, however, is that everything I'm doing is being very toned down. It's getting a gray texture over all of it, and I'm losing my highlights, which is imperative to keep in mind because it means you'll have to go back in with a fairly sharp eraser and remedy all of these situations. What it also means is that we'll have to go in and ensure that we are resharpening all of the lines that require sharpening. And so I'm taking this 8B pencil and I'm going back over a lot of the lines that I've previously made, and I'm just ensuring that they remain sharp, they remain fairly bold, and that we can ensure that we see the separation within each flower and it doesn't all blend into one kind of wash of gray. So it's really important to keep in mind layering. Normally we talk about layering in painting, however it can be really imperative with drawing as well. Almost any art form you're doing involves a lot of layering. And yes, you can cheat, you can do 1 or 2 layers instead. as I'm doing here, but you will end up with a slightly subpar result. And so I'd highly recommend just doing as much layering as you can. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it can be a little bit boring. You're working on the same thing, but it can really render beautiful results. And so to the end of this, I try to add in a little bit more layering just to show you by erasing and covering things up repeatedly. But all of that being said, now you do see that I am working with a very small sharp eraser, and I'm trying to bring highlights in the tops of the petals, because the tops of the petals are primarily what the light is going to be hitting. Well, as you move down the petal, even if it is on the left side, even if it is on the bright side, it's going to be receiving shadows from all of the petals around it. So it's not going to be that bright after all, just the top of the petals. And that's something to be really cognizant of. Just because something is in an area where a lot of light is being cast, just because it is closer to that light source, doesn't necessarily mean that it is going to be extremely bright, because different portions of our subject can be casting shadows upon it, and that is really imperative to keep in mind, because it makes it a lot more interesting and it'll make it a lot more realistic. Now, all of that being said, we're going down and we're working on the bottom portion of the flower. And here, you'll notice that even though we had three main petals, I made the main one in the middle very complicated, and I added in a lot of folds and movements, and that's because generally when things are smaller, you don't need to add a lot of detail to make it interesting, right? Because it's already very condensed and there's a lot going on in said area. However, when you're working with a very large petal, something that is innately without a lot of lines, you need to kind of create another way of keeping it interesting, of creating a lot of detail. And so in that, I created folds and bends, and these folds and bends are happening due to the rest of the petals kind of being condensed around it and pushing it in various ways. So it's very natural, there's nothing wrong with doing it, and I think it actually adds to the aesthetic of the flower itself. It's creating detail where you might have issue with just the line work. And so from here, I'm working in with my mechanical pencil, I'm sharpening lines, I'm erasing highlights, and I'm just ensuring that I'm getting a good use of sharpness with a decently high contrast. So really, you could do all of this with one pencil, but the more that you use, the more layering you can incorporate. But again, if you're a beginner, if you're just trying to learn, if you're trying to get into it, honestly, just worry about the lights and the darks. Just create gradients, just ensure that you are getting the general line work of the drawing done itself. Everything else can come in time, and you don't have to get everything right immediately. We all make mistakes, we all learn at different paces, and there's nothing wrong with taking your time with this. As long as you're doing it, as long as you're practicing and you're learning, you are doing a great thing, and you really shouldn't worry about anything else. Take your time, learn what you want to, and just work on it in that sort of way. Now here at the top left hand corner, you'll notice that I'm taking portions out of the flower, and that's another way to add a little bit of detail and interest within the piece. You can kind of add these cuts in the flower, because flowers, they're not man-made, they are organic, and they come with flaws. Bugs and various creatures move on them and through them. And sometimes when they grow, different areas split, and so you get a lot of inconsistencies, and these inconsistencies don't make it less beautiful, but instead I think they really make it much more interesting and beautiful. So I definitely highly suggest incorporating that sort of thing into the flower itself. Now from there, I wanted to show you another type of style, and that's more of a tattoo-y illustration look. Now this can be really popular, and I find a lot of people really enjoy this because it has so much more contrast, so much more of a pop, and it's really an interesting look. So here I'm just taking a black marker and I'm going over all of the very dark, high contrasted areas. I'm trying to keep the movement of my marker consistent with the movement of each individual petal. However, when it gets very dark, I start beginning a cross-hatching process, which is where you move the marker in the way that it's supposed to, and then you move it in the very opposite direction, creating a lot of miniature squares in between, or even more black. but that is the process of cross-hatching, and it is generally intended to make an area much darker. Now, in this process, I'm also highlighting all of the edges in this dark color. It's not realistic, but again, it makes everything pop and it separates it from the outer area. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope this helped. In next video, we will cover how to paint a flower as well, and I hope that will be interesting. Now you know how to draw one, then you can know how to paint one. Hit that subscribe button to see that, and once it's up, I will include the link down below in the description, so also please feel free to check that out. Thank you so much for watching. I truly hope you've enjoyed, and again, if you have any questions or inquiries regarding today's work or anything else you've been working on, please feel free to leave me a comment, send me a message, and you can actually send me your work on my Facebook page, where I'd be more than happy to provide for you a constructive, positive critique where we can just talk about art. It's a friendly, creative space, and I welcome you to join me there. Now, that being said, if you look in the description of this video, you will also find a link to my mailing list. And upon signing up for that, you can receive free real-time videos, extra tips, tricks, videos. There's a myriad of things to explore, and I hope to explore them with you. Now, if you'd like anything specific done, tutorial-wise, please let me know. I'd take requests, and I'd be more than happy to help you in any way that I can. Now, all of that being said, I'd just like to thank you for taking the time out today, watching this with me, spending the time here, hitting that like button, that subscribe button, leaving a comment. Every little thing you do here, it matters immensely to me, and I just can't tell you how grateful I am. So thank you, and have a wonderful day.